All right. Good morning, good afternoon, early evening. Welcome, everyone. Really, really excited for today's session with the team at Leapsome. I know we have folks joining from around the world. Welcome. And today we're going to have an intimate panel discussion on navigating challenging times for the crucial role of effective managers in 2024. As I mentioned, we'll be having this discussion with the team at Leapsome. If you're unfamiliar with Leapsome, they're an all-in-one intelligent people enablement platform trusted by CEOs and HR teams at more than 1,500 forward-thinking companies such as Spotify, Monday.com, and Unity. They drive employee development, productivity, and engagement. The platform offers an integrated suite of tools for goal setting and OKRs, performance reviews and 360s, competency frameworks, learning and onboarding, engagement surveys, feedback and praise, compensation and promotions, and meeting management. So since we have some new folks in the room here that don't necessarily know what TroopHR is, we are the premier community and resource for modern HR leaders. And you can learn more about Troop at TroopHR.com. As a quick reminder from the Troop team, our next learning session is actually tomorrow, an expert workshop for our HRpreneur community on how to build an evergreen consulting business. You can learn more and register for that in our live learning registration channel. Before we get started, a little background on our guest speakers today. Dookchitra, who's the VP of People at Leapsome, and Anja Schauer, who's the Global Head of Customer Success at Leapsome. Luck is the inaugural VP of People at Leapsome. Based in Leapsome's New York City office, Luck brings over 15 years of HR expertise to the role. She is a Princeton University graduate with a rich career history that includes leadership roles at Spotify, Teachable, and Modern Meadow. Next up is Anja Schauer, who is the Global Head of Customer Success at Leapsome. She's based in Leapsome's Berlin office. Anja brings close to 20 years of experience in leadership to customer success to her customer success role. She has expansive experience driving engagement, satisfaction, growth, and success to internal teams and external customers. Quick housekeeping note before we get started. If you have questions, you can certainly add them into chat. We are going to allot some time at the end of our discussion to go through Q&A. So if you want to hold them to the end, you can do that as well. Both myself and my colleague, Nicole Feely, our Troop Experience Lead, will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. And we welcome you to ask your questions, as we definitely want to provide some answers to that. With that, I'm going to stop my share, highlight our speakers, and again, welcome you all to today's session. Thank you so much for joining us, team at Leapsome, and all of our attendees. Okay. And I think we should be good to go. Luck and Anja, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. So before I kick things off with our questions about what makes great managers, Anja and Luck, just want to welcome you. If there's anything that you want to share about your backgrounds with the crowd, or anything further to share about Leapsome before we dive into the discussion.
Just for me, you rounded up quite nicely. Thank you. So I'm good on my side.
Yeah, I'll just give a shout out to Troop myself. I'll just say I'm a proud Troop HR member too. So if you haven't joined, it's a wonderful community.
Thank you so much for that, Luck. So let's get started. We're going to kick things off. My first question is actually for Anja. We hear and read about managers being quote unquote squeezed and burned out. How do you think the manager role has evolved over the last few years? And what do you think are the top challenges for managers in today's workplace environment?
All right, very good question. And I don't know how many managers we have here, but I hope I speak for all of you. But basically, when it comes to how that role has evolved in the past, let's just talk about the decade, right? So first of all, what comes to mind for me is, let's start from outside inside, basically. For me, the biggest change has been like or the surrounding chain has been the market, and not just the labor market, but also buyer versus producer market. So all these different markets have changed, and that due to that massive development in technology. Like when I look back then, technology and SaaS and a software has come with a room full of technology, and now there is a cloud. And it's just, back then we had software, but it looked a lot different than it does today. And all of that has changed massively, and my role as a manager in that market and tech development has changed. And I said change a lot of times in the past 60 seconds. So the change has changed even. So back then change was a annual cycle, a 24-month cycle. Now change is like happening with like the speed of light. And so the speed of change has changed massively. And other than moving in, what also has changed when I started as a manager many years ago, my diversity was different age groups and potentially different political opinions, but that was the diversity that I faced. The diversity we have now is so much larger for a good reason, and I love that, but obviously that also changes my role. And like moving into more recent events, which for me, my time calculation is always pre-COVID and post-COVID. And just to state the obvious, especially with COVID, what was very apparent for a manager role was now there is this thing called mental health. I don't know, it has been a thing before, but it was a thing. And now it's actually something, and I hope we get to talk about that. I don't want to dive too deep into that later, but mental health and my worry about it, or my focus on that for my team, has definitely changed a lot. And also, and that's the very obvious one, is we're all remote right now. I mean, Luck, I see you sitting in the office. Tracy, you're at home. I'm at home. And obviously we built the connection remotely. And so that is like a huge differentiator. Before that, I could see how someone walked in, if someone was like, good morning, everyone, or just a hi. If someone was hi every day, that's okay. But if someone was coming in with a good morning, sunshine, and greeting, and ponytails swinging, and then someone was with dropping shoulders did not, then I can pick up all these clues that I cannot do now. So that is how my role has changed. And I think the second part of the question was about the challenges that I'm facing. So basically what I'm talking a lot about, and that has been different a couple of years ago, is the efficiency / profitability. So like what's efficient today is definitely not going to be efficient in 6 months from now. We're not even talking about 12 months from now, but it's not going to be efficient in 6 months. So that is definitely something that has changed massively. Obviously, as I mentioned before, that diversity in workforce is a challenge, and I have to be very intentional with what I do, how I do it, and how I communicate. So that's changed. Another thing is, since we talked about the remote setup, for me, it's important to build trust and meaningful relations, obviously, with my team. And I cannot, because I work from home, I'm like not very often in the office. And even if I am, my team might not be there. So to build up like a very intentional and deep connection with my team has definitely is a challenge, because I'm not sitting in the office every day. And at the same time, I do want to be productive, right? So that is something that I'm challenged with. The whole, I think I mentioned that the complexity of it is definitely something. And since we're talking about HR and we're with Leapsome, what's definitely a challenge in general, because right now I'm not managing ICs, I'm managing managers. And the enablement for especially first-time managers is something so crucial, and it's a challenge for every company. And like I learned, I effed up quite a few times. That's how I learned. But I also had time. But the change that's happening now is so fast, and people get pushed into roles and into leadership positions with such a massive influence and multiplier effect, that the enablement part is a massive challenging factor. Sorry. I hope that answers the question. It was a lot.
Yeah, no, very thorough. A couple of quick things I just want to highlight that you said. First of all, I mean, and this is where Leapsome just fits in so well is, just because you give someone the title manager doesn't make them a manager. They need to be upskilled. They need to be taught how to be an effective manager. And we all know that people don't stay in jobs because of their salary. They stay in jobs because of their managers. And it's such an important thing that is often overlooked. And one of the reasons I remember sitting down with your founder, Jenny, and we talked about this, that it can't just be telling someone what they have to do. It has to be giving them the tools to level up. And the other thing, which you touched upon, which I think is such an interesting thing in this, as you said, post-COVID world, is we're dealing with global workforces. So now we're talking about different cultures, different time zones, different holidays. There's so many things to consider that it's just a labyrinth of challenges. All right, Luck, up to you. So Gartner data shows that leader and manager effectiveness is the number one priority for HR teams in 2024. Do you agree? And if so, why not? And if not, why?
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Anja. A lot of stuff follows what you said. I definitely agree. I would say for me, it's always been just being in the HR seat. That partnership with managers is something that's always been really important in terms of how effective even the HR team can be. But I would say right now, why it's so important, a lot of things Anja touched on. I think the pre and post-COVID world, I think the remote and technology has enabled us to, before COVID, you could work from home a couple of days. Now it's probably all the time. I think Anja and I are both managing global teams now. And so that connection isn't always there. And it takes intentional time to connect with the team, but it's in a virtual way. You have to make time to kind of travel and do these things. And so I think it's really difficult. And so hybrid is a new thing. So I think people, yes, like we don't want to force people back to the office. Oh, wait, but we have to force people. So there's a business need, and then there's the people need. And then I think we're all just adjusting to being humans in the modern world where, yes, there's a computer. We were talking about all of our kids and stuff. There are kid drop-offs. It's different. You used to go to the office every day. Now you don't. There are a lot of things that are happening in the news that before, people didn't talk about it at work. Like you were kind of like, it was a faux pas to do that. Now, if you don't talk about it, that's the faux pas. So it's really like upskilling in crisis management comms, presentation comms, like how to connect with people remotely, and all of these skills. It's not like you took a college course and did it, and you learn how to do it. It's just happening in real time, and not everyone knows how to do that because also we're facing a workforce that a lot of the people coming into the workforce, this next generation is really pushing us to be better, right? And also you have to remember they were probably in college during the pandemic, so they also had a different experience. So whereas I had internships where I could see people doing things, I could watch leaders really, leading by example and picking up the cues that I thought, ooh, that's a really great leader and that's a great manager, and picking up those skills. You don't always have that in tangible ways anymore. So you have to like think about the digitalization of everything, documenting things, but documenting them in a way where they're real and they're human and you don't feel like you're just following a robot prompt or an AI comment. You have to feel genuine about it. And I think right now, all of these things are kind of being thrown in the air and you have to be really good at AI, but you also have to be really human, but you also have to use technology. So I feel like everything all together creates this swirl. But on top of that, for managers, they also have to do their day job, right? So they need to have functional expertise. They need to, understand, career growth for different levels in an org, right? So someone who's early career, someone who's late career. So I think all of this stuff right now, especially because I do think the new generation is pushing us to really make sure that each of us, no matter where we are, whether an IC or a manager, we really know how to lead and be thoughtful humans, which I think is really great, but I think it makes the whole traditional corporate work structure a little bit different where lines are blurred, and we just have to keep rethinking how we train people and what tools we give them. So I do think right now, because of all the changes that are also these great opportunities, it's creating this environment where it's just like you can't find a stable moment. And I think that is just a mental load. You talked about mental health, but I think all of this is really falling upon the managers who now, you have less budget, you can't hire the people that you wanted to hire anymore because of market conditions. And so it just makes it really tough. And this follows this period of like super high growth, where you were used to using all of these things. And so I feel like it's just this time where there's so much change. And I think where HR and managers can really come together is how can we create something more stable? How can we make it easier? How can we provide coaching? Like, I think it really is a make or break moment for companies to support managers to make sure that they have the tools that they need, because it's like when we put the oxygen mask on ourselves, we need to do that for our managers, because the most complaints that come from employees is like, my manager isn't doing this, my manager isn't doing that. Like, but it's also like, have we provided the tools to make sure that they're able to do their job and handle all of these people and everyone's feelings and career development and stuff. So I do think the times right now has created a lot of this, and we could be in a moment where we can start shifting that to support folks more too.
Thanks for sharing that, Luck. And I think the other thing is it's never too early to start. You know, if you ingrain it in your company, no matter how small it is, and you just grow up that way, it's part of your culture. It's part of who you are. It's the way you build managers and career development. And so it's a lot harder to retroactively fit that once you get to that 100, 150 employee range, where people are used to doing it in a different way, and then you got to adjust. So absolutely agree. Luck, I'm going to stick with you for a moment here. A couple more stats with respect to Gartner. So Gartner research also shows that employees with ineffective managers are 15 times more likely to be low performers, 13% less engaged, and of course, 3 times more likely to quit. How do you define an ineffective manager, and how do you define an effective manager?
Great. And the stats totally make sense to me, because I think a lot of us have left a really bad manager or ineffective manager, and a lot of us have stuck around for the effective one. So I think an ineffective manager is someone who, one, doesn't really develop a relationship with their team member, who like doesn't quite understand them as on the human level, because I think that's the foundation for building a good relationship and understanding, you know, maybe they can't grow right away, but where does this person want to grow to, so that I can start presenting them with opportunities when they arise, and developing that relationship so you can give candid feedback to help them. And we all know that giving feedback can be tough. And so when you have that firm relationship, I think you can build forward faster. And so I think the ineffective part comes when you don't have that foundation or psychological safety with that person. That person doesn't communicate. So if you're hearing something, but your team never hears about it, and they're always wondering what's going on, it feels like there's a big gap. And I think if you surprise someone by letting them go without giving them that feedback, I think that's an ineffective manager, because it's just, how did we get to this place? Whereas on the other hand, I think someone more effective is someone who cares about you. You know, your manager has your back. You're gonna work hard because they do. I think a lot of people are saying, hey, work isn't your friend. I agree, but I also have a lot of friends that I've made from work, and a lot of them have been previous managers or mentors, right? And so I think if you take on that real leadership role with your direct reports, and you really try to understand what they want to do and how they want to grow, and you think back to like, ooh, how was I treated? Was that cool, or was that not so cool? And really try to remember that when you're managing folks, because I do think that there's a lot of we put a lot on our managers. We expect them to do a lot of us, and I think there's some of it that we should do. That's why we're in the roles that we're in, and our job is to like help those folks grow. And so I think those managers that really care about that and take that to heart are the ones that are going to be more effective. So it's not, we have Leapsome and it's a great tool, but it's not about the tool. I think it's about the relationship. I think it's about how you use the information that you have, how you set up your meetings, how regular you are, how accountable you hold yourselves to making time for that individual. And I think those things really shine through at the end of the day. Like, you remember that the person looked out for you and called you out and praised you versus taking credit for what you did, that kind of thing. So I think those most effective managers, at least the ones in my career, have always been the ones that looked out for me and helped me make the right decision, even if it felt tough, and helped me, you know, process tough feedback as well. So I think those for me are the key differences.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the managers I've had in my career. And when I started out, and it was a different time, managers are scary. You were afraid of them and they weren't your friends. And, it took a long time for me to have a manager that taught me managers are there to support you, elevate you, and for someone you can trust. And, as you were talking, that one manager that really changed my perspective is someone that I'm still friends with to this day, even though we haven't worked together for over a decade. All right, Anja, shifting back over to you. Do you think that each company needs to have its own definition of effective management, or is there some kind of playbook that we can follow?
Yes and yes, actually. So obviously there is there's a baseline or some principles for good effective management. I think that's undebatable. There is a baseline. So yes, there's a playbook potentially. But that being said, obviously this second yes is, in my opinion, like threefold. So first of all, yes, every company individually has to define what is an effective, what is a good, what is an excellent management for or manager for me. So that's the one layer. The second layer, in my opinion, is it's often senior leadership knows all of that and they know what they're looking for, but you need to share it with your managers. And because to have that defined for yourself, but then not letting your managers know what the expectations are is fatal at times. And I'm not saying this is a one-way street. So me as a manager, the first question, even in my interview process, is what are your expectations for me as a manager? So this is to all those managers out there, this is not just don't expect it coming, also go out and ask. And the third layer to that, yes, is basically, it's one thing to have it in your company, to share what it means with the managers, but the third layer is to then also enable, similar to what Luck was saying earlier. It's because there's so many like first-time managers who have been, like you just mentioned, that have been still in university during COVID. And so for them, it is like they're being thrown into situations because they have been amazing ICs, but being an IC, like an individual contributor, versus then managing individual contributors is a totally different skill we're talking about. And so obviously it's knowing it as a company, sharing it with your managers, but then also enabling them. And as a manager, always also enable yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, Anja, sticking with you for a minute, what strategies have you implemented to enable your employees to do great work? And can you share some examples?
Yeah, sure. So again, similar to what Luck was saying earlier, I think one of the most important strategies is the feedback part. So it sounds like strategy is a big thing and feedback might not sound that big, but it actually is. For me, like in every relation, actually, I assume positive intent. And that is for the people I work with, that I generally talk to. It also goes for myself. So if they're doing something in my team, they're doing it to the best of their capabilities, to their knowledge. And if I, based on whatever that is, more knowledge or experience, whatever, or just knowing what the direction should be, I need to give that feedback. And in order to do so, it is super important to not just give critical feedback, but to have that also that psychological safety. That's the basis. And you need to build that trust first before you can then go into giving feedback and say, hey, you know what, you're doing great at what you do, but have you ever thought about doing it like that? Or did you ever, like, I'm trying doing it with questions instead of telling people, hey, go this way. Instead of I'm trying to like develop it into questions, and so they can find their own way. So the feedback part, and again, as what I've said, it's not just the critical feedback in a review, but it's also like giving praise and telling people when they do amazing. That's just as important. And obviously we, like at Leapsome, we're using praise, we're using the reviews, but also we have these for the candid feedback that they might want to share anonymous. We have the quarterly surveys, and that helps me a lot to figure out. And then when you have that conversation and anonymously, they know it's coming from me. But after conversation back and forth, I'm very blessed with a team that is very frank and open and says, hey, okay, this is me. and then they tell the name, and then we can take it to a one-on-one. So the feedback part is super important, and a facilitator for that feedback, which would probably be the second strategy, would be the effective meetings. So in my past, it's been all over the place. You meet your team once a week, ideally once a week, and you meet on a Wednesday, and on Thursday things happen and you forgot about them, and a week later it's like in the back of your head, you don't think about that anymore, except for you writing it down somewhere. And so especially within Leapsome, I've been using Leapsome before I joined Leapsome also. It's like I can open the tool, I can put it in, I have a talking point. And for me as a manager, it's just so important to become prepared, both for myself as well as for my like direct report, but also for me to be prepared as in, if there's a question that I know I don't have the answer to and I have to go to RevOps or whoever, I can check that before, and I don't have to jump out of the meeting and open Slack and say, let me ask, or do it afterwards. I can ideally provide the answer during the meeting because I am prepared, and that gives me the opportunity to have that open and intentional trusted conversation first, but then again going back to like a focused, productive meeting. So which I, again, as I said, is a very intentional topic that I need to do working remotely.
Thanks for sharing that, Anja, and showing my aging and going back. One of the things early on as a manager that I was taught is, when you're giving feedback, start with a positive, give the constructive piece, and then end on a positive as well, so that you're not hiding the constructive piece, but you're reminding people that there are a lot of positives, but there's also a lot of room for improvement. All right, Luck, what strategies would you recommend to HR teams that want to improve their manager effectiveness?
Yeah, great question. Anja touched on a lot of them. I actually even think, and working at Leapsome, it's manager enablement. I really think it's making sure it's not like the old school way of doing things where it's like, learn this strategy and have this conversation. It's really something deeper. And one thing that has been a trend or a theme in my previous roles was just managers feel alone sometimes, right? Because you can have your group, but you also sort of feel like I'm just on an island. So creating a sense of community for managers, I think, is super important. So I think in current company and previous companies, creating a forum, just something as simple as that, where managers can actually talk about things and making it not about just updates from the HR team or the leadership team where nobody can talk to each other, but really like, hey, this is coming up. Giving folks like a heads up, letting the discussion happen organically, but creating that moment. Because like we said, everyone is super busy. So it's a lot harder to do these things now, especially in these hybrid environments. And so creating that community where you know that you can trust on this peer group to talk about things in confidence, right? I think you also, from the HR side, should have this HR business partner. Why I love HR business partners. I think them providing the coaching, the guidance, the thought partner with managers is really helpful and informative, and can help fast track that first time manager to do the right thing and hold them accountable in a lot of ways. But in terms of enabling the managers further, I think it's learning. So everything we touched on in terms of like training. So yes, we have to do training. It's not necessarily just out of the box training. It is looking at what your organization needs. What are the key things you need to do? If you had to prioritize the top 2 things that your managers should be doing for folks, what should that be? We each should know what that is, and we should hone in on those so we can quickly build skills over time. I think the coaching piece, I love that the HR world is growing in terms of coaching opportunities, and a lot of folks are fractional and providing coaching, and it's so available now, where it used to be this thing just for the C-suite, like this executive coaching. Now it's available to everybody and anybody. And I think people, like, again, the folks coming into the workforce, they're demanding it. It's something that they are looking forward to having and having someone on their side. So not just the coaching, but the mental health, et cetera. But I think the part that really gels everything is the practice. And so again, this is where HR can also provide this, because it's difficult. And each review cycle, I'm sure we all go through this, like you want to give feedback, you read the feedback, ooh, this doesn't actually say all the tough things that it should say. And so it's like creating forums, creating the calibrations where you can talk about it and you can get support from your peers to say, yes, you didn't put this in. Here are some ideas. How can you put that in? But I think it takes space, right? Because nobody is perfect, and we have to try to like have a thought partner to do this with. I think it's great when it's your HR business partner, but it could also be your peers. And yeah, I think it's just pulling that all together, making a space for it to be where you don't forget this. So having the meetings for the managers as well to make sure that we gel these things and can connect better really can help managers feel part of the company versus just sort of the middle person that needs to distribute information without any agency in sharing what's happening. So I think it's making sure your managers feel really connected to what the company and leadership is doing, because they are your frontline leaders, and not forgetting that, because I think the middle manager gets like a rough reputation out there a lot of the times. And I really think that they're the agent of change for a lot of work cultures.
Thanks for sharing that perspective, Luck. Okay, Anja, with rapid advancements in technology, especially AI, how should managers adapt their leadership styles to maintain team productivity and cohesion?
Yeah. So I want to quickly start with one of my team leads has been to a conference last week, and she came back and told me that AI is going to exponentially increase in its potential and knowledge, and in a number that is, it's going to be in the next 5 years 100,000 times smarter than it is now. That's like mind blowing. I can't even wrap my head around that because it's already smart, very smart right now. And so like this is just insane. On the other hand, what she was telling me, that this is like, it seems like opposite poles, like we're pushing into AI and like with a lot of resources. On the other hand, in this post-COVID era, especially, it's a time of very lonely people, right? We grew apart because I'm sitting at home. I'm like, I have my dog. I'm not saying I'm lonely. I have these meetings, but it's like we have this mobile device that connects us to the world, but it's not really connecting us, right? And so that is a little segue into my answer is obviously AI will, and it will even do more so in the future, will be able to take off a lot of repetitive tasks, like stuff and processes, and that it can just like repeat it, like processes that are repetitive can be replaced by AI, just like as a matter of fact. And that being said, the glue that holds all of this together is the personal connection. So what this, and I had a lot of conversations with other ICs, with managers about that, because there is this fear out there. Hey, okay, so does that mean that I don't have a job in 5 years, or not, at least not this job that I'm having right now? And that might be the case. And quite frankly, my job didn't even exist 10 years ago. So I think that while AI is evolving so quickly, it's our job as managers to use that extra time that we get because AI is supporting us, to work on strategic processes or strategic projects. And what I said before, change is changing, and to be part of that change and not just be like witnessing and reacting to it, but being part of the change and making that happen. And on the other side, another important aspect of this extra time is it's not really extra time, because that's the budget and the complexity that's coming in. But what we can do as managers is use our focus to make people like just focus on the people aspect of things, because obviously we need to enable our people to be okay with AI and to deal with it and to use it to make the most of it. But on the other hand, by focusing on strategic projects, for example, or just focusing on the people side of things, because that is lacking, and that is what's holding it all together, is these connections that we make. And I think that is the leadership style that you should adapt to and say, okay, I get it, AI is taking a lot of things over from my job, but my job now is even more to focus on my people and how to get them together, how to build a connection with me and the team, but also with the peers within that team. So I think that is what we should focus on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anja. We actually talk about AI and HR a lot at Troop. And you know, AI, it's going to get smarter because it's the nature of what AI is. But we always say the outputs are only as good as the inputs, and the inputs really are being led by the people. And so, yes, it can help streamline things for us, but we'll become smarter, more efficient, productive humans and professionals if we use it in the right way. All right, Lux. So, what role do managers play in fostering a diverse and inclusive workplace? And what strategies have proven most effective in your experience?
Great question. And I like that it's tied with the AI and the inputs that matter. So I think from a diversity and inclusion perspective, I think managers really need to play a major role here. I think, we've seen an evolution with DEI, and then it has this political course. But for me, it's always been part of how I grew up. Inclusion, making sure you try to understand another person's perspective, where they came from, want to learn. I think the next movement should be managers thinking about it, not just in how they build their teams, which I think is where we always go first, like the recruiting, making sure that you've got representation. And I think it starts with a lot of that. But I think it's also how do managers tie that to the business work that they're doing? How is a product team thinking about DEI inclusion and how they're building their product? How are we thinking about our customers and the different perspectives that they bring to the conversation and how they use our tool? How does that interaction play? And I feel like for inclusion to really be part of everything, this is how managers need to shift their thinking, not just about their teams. Of course, that's going to be important in building relationships, understanding, making sure we can have those tough conversations. You're creating a safe space for folks, but really thinking as well on how our business does this. How do we market this? Like, we don't want to just slap a rainbow flag on something and then have it not mean anything. We want it to be meaningful. And for that to be true, you need to look at the inclusion lens on all of the work, business processes, how we communicate within the company. Like, it should be something that is very foundational to how we do things. And I think this is another thing that managers can have in their toolkit to think about, but they need the space and time to think about it because it's not a clear answer necessarily. But this is where I think AI and things like this can start helping us, because you can write prompts and have a thought partner in real time. But I do think that the modern world requires that we have inclusive managers and how they think about everything.
It's interesting because last year and the year prior in June for Gay Pride Month, we did a panel talking about how to create inclusive workplaces and support employees in the LGBTQ plus community. And after we reflected and said, this is a conversation that doesn't just happen in June. This needs to be happening throughout the year. And so now we've actually been doing quarterly panels on the topic. And that's, I mean, you don't need to do a panel within your organization, but that's the thing. It needs to be an ongoing conversation, whether it's for the LGBTQ community or whatever minority community you want to support within your organization. All right. So, Anja, now shifting gears a little bit here. In the context of remote and hybrid work environments, what unique challenges do managers face and how can we overcome them?
Yeah. So especially in that remote situation, I think I mentioned it before, before COVID, we were all sitting in an office and you could see, okay, how someone was walking into the office. If you could see people at the water cooler, if they're chatting or if they're venting, you could just pick up all these clues. You could hear them on the phone with their customers. You just saw them every day. You spent 10 hours a day with them. You had lunch breaks with them. So you were interacting with them on a daily basis. And I'm still interacting with my team on a daily basis, obviously, but not in that intensity. I don't see how they come in, how they position themselves, how they chat with colleagues. I don't also between colleagues, if there's anything going on, if there's some conflict, I don't pick all of that up. So obviously, generally, the baseline of good management is still holds up. But and I think I mentioned that before. I have to be very intentional, and also I have to create, and that is again the baseline, that trust and that psychological safety for my team to open up and be okay with not being okay. And that is for me, like as I said, a very intentional topic, and it starts with me. So if I expect my team to open up, I have to be the first one to do so and to be vulnerable myself. And I said that in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, there's days when you just have 30% in your battery. There's just 30%. If you bring those 30% to work, you brought 100% that day. And we need to be okay with that. And to just share that and say, okay, today is my 30% day. I'm going to take it slow. Please bear with me if I'm not the sunshine that you're used to. So to just be okay with that. And as I mentioned, very intentional about it. And I believe that's one thing as a manager, to create that safety and that intentionality, is that a word? To be intentional, but also again, and I'm not saying this is a one-way street, but also for companies to, you said, Luck, you said that earlier, to give managers the space and the room to actually do so, and that's one thing, but also the enablement, because it is different, and you need to pick up clues way faster and have other antennas and feelers for it, that you just because you don't have all these clues. You have 15 minutes at the beginning of a meeting. Even if you only have 20 minutes, then it's 5 minutes to pick up all of this and to create a safe space where people can say, hey, my last week has been like, I'm not at a good place. Okay, got it. And then I can work on that, but I need to create that safe space, and I need a company to allow me and enable me to create that safe space as well. So it's not just me as a manager. I need that company to support me doing it.
I love that. And I love how you shared lead by example. You know, if you want to reflect something, live that reflection. All right, Luck. So how we're going to go back to, actually, I'll start with you, Anja, because you had brought it up earlier. How can managers better support mental health and well-being of teams, especially during these times of high stress and uncertainty?
I could go an hour just about that, but I'm going to make it quick. So for me, it starts with acknowledging that mental health can be a life-threatening disease. One of my friends shared a story with me, and for any medical personnel here, don't kill me on that. It's just a picture, but she shared with me, if you have a diabetes, whatever type, and your body's not producing insulin. You don't see that as a person, you don't smell it, you can't see them like in the way they talk, you just don't know about that. Their body doesn't produce insulin. Okay, but it's life-threatening. It's the same with depression. I'm not saying mental health is always depression, but her comparison was mental health, and her depression was, I'm not producing dopamine. And that can also be a life-threatening situation. And to just acknowledge that, and that picture did help me. Okay, her body doesn't produce dopamine, and she has to take medication for that, to just not be a happy person, but at least to be on neutral. And that actually really helped me, and to acknowledge that mental health is not just, hey, I also have a bad day, just get your shit together. That's not mental health. And to acknowledge that and say, okay, this is not just a person having a bad day. That's one thing. And to start with that and be very intentional and educate yourself as a manager about that. And again, to create that, I've said that before, create that psychological safety, to share if you're having like a bad week, a bad month. And also, and I think that is also crucial, because I did learn it the hard way in my teams, and for the employer, hence the company, to say, okay, I also need to enable my managers in that topic, because I'm not a therapist. I cannot, I don't own this. I'm not responsible. Hopefully not. I'm not responsible for this. And I am not there to help. I'm there to support and give them the space they need in order to say, you know what, take your time, be gone for 2 months. I'd rather not have you here for a couple of weeks, but then have you full on back. And not lose you at all, and to just give them the space and the security. You know what, I got your back. We will cover for you. You will get back. You will still have your customers that are not a burn field. To create that is also a thing that a company needs to enable, but also to release the pressure off of managers to, oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I heal this person? This is not my responsibility as a manager. And I think that is super important for a company to also, first of all, enable their managers, but also like give them the support and the like security, essentially, to say you are not responsible for that. Your responsibility is to take care of that person and give them the freedom they need, but you will not heal or cure them. And that is like, obviously you need to do that yourself as well. And that's why I'm saying with intentional, but it goes both ways.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Sorry.
that. And yeah, no, that, I mean, that was great. And I think Luck could agree, besides managers, that kind of the sentiment that often falls on HR pros to be that quote unquote therapist or mental health support. And you want to be supportive, but you're not a mental health provider for that employee. All right, I'm going to wrap up with one more question with Luck that's somewhat timely to the macro environment, and then we'll switch it over and ask the audience for questions. So if you have any questions, please start entering them into chat while we wrap up with Luck in this last question. So we all know what the economy is like globally at this time. So what do you think is the key to empowering and supporting managers through navigating layoffs and potential layoffs? And I will say, you know, this is obviously something that comes up in Troop a lot. And it's like, how do you make the best of a bad situation? So Luck, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Anja, for what you said about mental health. Really resonates in terms of the caring, but it's not the responsibility, it's the support. But yeah, related, unfortunately, I've had to help navigate more layoffs than I want to say, but I think the trick is communication and thinking through the support. So by that, I mean, there are a lot of different groups of people you need to support during a layoff. Those that have been impacted, of course, making sure that those conversations are done with care. But you need to understand that the manager may not have, one, even had a decision in what was happening. Two, may not have ever been trained on how to have these conversations. And they're learning this very likely in a very short period of time, where they need to process what's happening. And if they're impacted themselves, what that means, how they communicate, et cetera. But also if they aren't impacted, what does that mean for the team that stays? And so I think from an HR perspective and a leadership perspective, it's really thinking through each group of people and making sure that each communication is intentional. The talking points, the training, the information that you'll need to share with each group so that they can feel they have as much information as possible. Because again, in these situations, they can either be planned over a period of time or they can be planned in a shorter period of time, depending on what's happening with the company and the market. So I think for supporting managers through this, it's really about, okay, if this manager is going to stay here, how big was their team impacted? What do we need to do to help them make sure that they can help get their teams through the next phase, whatever that is? Because it's probably going to mean a lot of people have a lot of extra work that they weren't expecting to do. How are they going to shift? How are you arming that team with some resourcing of some kind, whether that's a tool or time off or something that can help support the team so that they do have something to share and it's not all like depressing and you know, and then how do you support them with their friends? They've colleagues that have been leaving. So I feel like when this is done as effectively as it can be, it is when you're offering resources to those impacted, you're offering resources to managers, you're making sure that they have a forum to speak to each other. Your founders and CEOs are making time for the whole company, and that you're creating those talking points and you're following up, right? So you don't just have the event, you do the thing, and then it's business as usual. You need to continue to see what that journey is like for probably the next 3 to 6 months to make sure the culture stays engaged, that you were working on the things that weren't working before, that you can use it as a moment to come back together, while also making sure you support those friends that have been impacted, et cetera. So I do think it just takes a lot of, like Anja said, intentional, thoughtful communication and care in terms of designing all of those pieces.
Thanks so much, Luck. And just want to again invite the audience to enter any questions you have into chat. We'll wait about 15 to 30 seconds to give time to enter. And if we don't hear anything, we do have some more questions we can ask our guests this morning. And Luck and Anja, thank you so much, because it's so informative in not only just providing your insight, but actually some of those actionable steps and strategies that you yourselves have successfully implemented in the past, and I'm sure will continue to implement in the future. Going to just one more time ask our audience if there's anyone that has any questions. And if not, we will prepare one of my follow-up questions that we pulled together. So sticking with you for just one more moment, Luck, um, how can managers improve their crisis management skills to better navigate unforeseen challenges while maintaining team morale? And, it could be repeated layoffs or a crisis for an organization, but obviously we know there are other crises that occur. Would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, great question. And I actually think crisis comms and crisis communication is one of the other new trainings that managers should go through. I think the first step, though, is remembering that we're human and that you might need to take the time to process whatever crisis has just happened, and you should do so. And this is where supporting managers to be able to have either that partner or your manager, whoever that is, you should be able to talk to them about, hey, this is going on. How do I process this? If you're lucky enough to have a coach or a resource like that, I think it's making sure you understand what's happening, because if you don't take a moment, you're going to create reactionary responses and high stress moment, and you just need to take a moment to breathe. And then on top of that, I think it's like now we've got all these great communities like a Troop, like, manager communities and things. What group do you trust to help have these conversations where you can like process and talk through things and then come back to your team? Remember the things that are important are to keep them engaged, try to keep things as calm as possible, and then start creating solutions for what that could be. But I think it's like a stepwise process. Try to separate from the emotion by processing it, and then come back with like bullet points, like things that you can actually tangibly do, because I think that helps you get out of crisis mindset and into like action and solution mindset.
So good. And I know Nicole echoed in the chat, because my knee-jerk reaction is react. And it's like, okay, just breathe for a moment and process. So thank you. And while you were chatting, we did get a couple of questions coming in. Are there any good resources to assist first-time managers that you would recommend, either Anja or Locke?
Do you want to go, Anja?
Okay. I think there's like a ton of resources out there. What I recommend to everyone who is a first-time manager is the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I think that is a great book. It has everything. It's an easy read, even though it's a textbook. It's as written in a story, and I think that is the baseline for a good manager. So that would be my first recommendation to start off.
It's a great one.
Thanks.
I would say, yeah, things like that have been great. I also think there are a lot of resources now on LinkedIn, from Troop, from everyone's creating a course, right? You can go to any like high, fancy school or, a private thing, and people have these courses where you can just pick up on things. So I think if ooh, this person needs some more help with just project management because they're a first-time manager and they're, I would do something like that. But if you need coaching one-on-one, there's courses and things you can look up online. You can even ask ChatGPT, like, how would you frame this, and have a first pass at things like that. So I think these are really quick ways you can start upskilling yourself and learning these things. And I do think for first-time managers, understanding what a coach is and does and can support a team can really help frame what you should do in terms of like, not giving advice, but guiding and things like that. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much. All right. How can HR enable managers to find a better balance between business KPIs and deliverables and their people management? Look, I'll start with you on that, and it's in the chat if you want me to repeat it.
Yeah, no. So I think, let me just make sure how can HR support? I think it's just, there's a lot, right, that comes on. So this is where I think there's a partnership with HR to make sure like, hey, that it's not so overwhelming. But I would say what the manager can control is vocalizing it, right? So a lot of times things that come to HR, it's like we're expected to just read everyone's mind and, and it comes to us. So I would say, be very clear. Hey, my plate is really full. You want us to do performance reviews? You want us to do engagement survey? You want us to do this all at once? And then I also have to deliver on this business need. So I think it's making sure that those things at the manager level are vocalized, so that leadership and HR can take action to make sure that either we shift priorities in the calendar and things like that, because I do think it's a lot. And I think we're in these fast-paced startup environments or, the business, we've got to do this in this tough environment. And it's hard to remember what time is, right? Because it's like you're working from home from the pandemic. I'm like, I still think it's 2020 sometimes, but it's 2024. So I think it's really being clear because again, we're not in front of each other. And so you can't see the frenetic energy sometimes. You can only, dole out responsibilities. And I think the other thing is there's a lot of people who will just take it and like keep carrying it. And you tend to give, your high performers a lot more work. And then they're the ones that get burnt out, right? So I would say it is everyone's responsibility to hold up their hand and say, I need some help, to pause for a moment and say these things, because only then can we start gravitating towards those things to help kind of alleviate some of the stress points. It's not always the case that you can do so, but I think taking that moment, somebody's got to react, right? And so I think this is the way you can actually get someone to listen.
Thank you so much for that, Luck. And this is for either of you as we come to the top of the hour. There is one more question in there. I'd love to get some insight from either or both of you. What management skills should college students ideally be learning to prepare them for the current management work environments? And I'm happy to jump in too, because I think back to when I went to school, which again, we don't have to talk about how long ago that was, but management was very different in so many ways. Like HR was literally like compliance, like do not rub against someone by the photocopy machine. And, I mean, literally that's what HR was. And now it's, yes, still don't do that, but it's evolved so much. And I think management, I think it has to be about always building your career up, always building your skill set, always leveling up. I think there needs to be something out there for emotional intelligence as well. I think that's something we often overlook. And yes, I know part of that is innate, but part of that can also be learned because of the environment that you're in. And so, anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. Luck and Anja, anything you would add as we're in this final moment of our discussion this afternoon?
I have one thing. So I think I plus 100 to everything you said, but I think the other thing that's coming up, because we have such a workforce that has to care about the human side, which this is a controversial take, but I think making sure that everybody who becomes a manager has a firm understanding of the business as well is important. So yes, you can learn lots of businesses, but the connection between what a business does and what a manager should do to help both from the front lines to help the business be successful, but as well as helping the employee, right? Because I think this is where a lot of managers, especially first-time managers, have difficulty separating the friendship and where you, like Anja, like you were saying, you have to be the therapist and you have to help solve the problem, to actually saying, okay, yes, your feelings are validated and I want to do that, but also here's the business reason why this is happening. Here's the business reason why this riff needs to happen right now. This is, it gives context to what's happening. And I've faced this a lot with managers where it's a disconnect from what the business is. And ultimately, this is what is funding the whole employee population. So it needs to be of consideration. And I think that's the part where it's a little bit murky these days.
Yeah, maybe one last thing, plus on everything you
yes,
said,
please,
is
Anja.
one last thing is the resilience part. As a manager, you are filtering a lot of information into different directions. And I think it is important to not let that get to you and to not, like, it's your job and to be okay with that being your job, and also to be the messenger of not so great news. You have to be okay with that, and you have to be resilient on that. So I think adding, not just adding to what you said. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Luck, Anja, the team at Leapsome. Just want to give a shout out to Letitia, who has helped to make this such a success, and Nicole from my team. To learn more about Leapsome, you can check out leapsome.com, TroopHR.com. We will be sending out follow-up recaps from Troop in the community and Leapsome to everybody who registered today, with some great links for resources. Thank you for your questions. Thank you again to our panelists, and have a great rest of your day and week, everyone. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.